It all started a long time ago in a village called Omolo. There was a man named Kalu. He was a quiet and hardworking farmer. He lived with his beautiful wife Ngozi and their 3 children. Kalu had a large piece of land he inherited from his late father. The land was difficult to farm because it contained many weeds, so nobody wanted to farm on it. But Kalu loved that land because it reminded him of his late father. Sometimes he would stand there, look at the tall grass, and feel proud that it belongs to him. He always said he would clear it one day and make it useful, but there was never enough time or strength. Still, in his heart, he felt something special about it, like the land was waiting for him to do something important. One morning, Kalu decided that the time has come for him to farm on the land. He took his hoe and cutlass and went to the land to dig and plant yam for the new season. The sun was hot, but he kept digging. Suddenly, he saw something strange. The soil was dark and shining, and it smelled strange and oily. Kalu bent down, touched it, and felt his heart beating fast. It was not a normal soil. He dug more and found more of the oily mud. He took a sample of it home, not knowing what it might be. When he showed it to Ngozi, he said angrily, "This is what I found in my father's land. Maybe I will go and look for someone who will explain to me what this means." He didn't know that the land he loved so much would soon destroy everything he had. The next day, Kalu went to the town with the dark soil in a bottle. He wanted someone to tell him what it was. He met a man who worked with an oil company. The man looked at the sample and his eye grew wide. He said, "This is crude oil. You are standing on a great wealth." Kalu's heart started beating fast. He couldn't believe it. He rushed home full of joy and fear. He told Ngozi everything, saying our land is rich. We are blessed. But Ngozi wasn't happy. She held her baby tightly and said softly, "Kalu, please be very careful. Great wealth can also bring great trouble." Her voice shook. She felt something bad would happen, but Kalu didn't listen. He said he would tell the village elder soon. That night, he couldn't sleep. His head was full of happiness and worries. The next evening, Kalu went back to the land to walk around it for the last time before going to tell the elders. The sky was already turning dark, and the air felt heavy. He moved slowly, touching the soil with his hands, whispering, "Thank you, Father, for giving me this land." He was proud of it, but also afraid. The wind blew cold around him, making strange sound in the grass. Suddenly, he felt like someone was watching him. He turned around and saw 3 men standing by the trees. Their faces were hard and dark. They were not from his village. They stepped closer and one said, "We heard you found something under this land." Kalu's stomach turned. He didn't know how they find out. He realized too late that his secret was no longer safe anymore. Kalu tried to speak calmly. He said, "This land is mine. I will share what I find if we all work together." But the men just laughed. Their eyes were cold, and one said, "We don't share anything. We'll take it all." Kalu's heart pounded. He turned to run, but they rushed at him. He swung his sword, hitting one man's hand, but there were 3 of them. They pushed him down, kicked him, and beat him until he could hardly breathe. Kalu begged them to stop, saying, "Please, I have a wife and children." But they didn't listen. The tallest one picked a sharp stick and drove it into Charlie's chest. His voice broke as he cried out in pain. The men dragged Kalu's body and buried him in a shallow grave, the same land he loved. They covered him with the orange soil and stamped the ground flat. One of them said, "No one will ever find him here." The wind blew softly, carrying the smell of orange soil and his blood. The land that Kalu loved so much has become his grave. The men left quietly through the forest, leaving behind his broken hoe and the smell of the dead. That night, something strange started happening in his land. The moon was full, and if anyone had walked by, they might have heard a soft, deep groan from under the ground. The first sound of a restless spirit had wakened. When Kalu didn't come home that evening, Ngozi waited all night. She walked to the door so many times, listening to the wind. By morning, she felt something inside her heart. She knew something terrible had happened. Then, she ran to the land with her children, calling Kalu's name again and again. The villagers went with her. They searched everywhere but they couldn't find him. The land looked calm and untouched. Ngozi fell to her knees and cried until her voice broke. The elders told her to go home, saying maybe Kalu had traveled. But Ngozi knew her husband would never leave without a word. She looked at the dark side and whispered, "You know where he is, don't you?" Days turned into weeks. Ngozi couldn't sleep anymore. Every evening, she went back to that same land, hoping for a sign. She could feel something strange there. The ground felt too cold and the air was too heavy. Sometimes she thought she heard faint footsteps or saw some ripples move through the soil, as if it were breathing. The villagers started avoiding the place. One night, Ngozi dreamed of Kalu standing beside her, covered in black mud, whispering, "Don't let them take it." When she woke up, she cried and held her children close. The land had taken her husband, but it wasn't done yet. Weeks turned into months and Kalu never came back. Ngozi sat outside her hut every night, staring at the road he used to walk on. The neighbors tried to comfort her, but she only shook her head. She said, "He didn't leave me. The land took him." Her eyes were always red and her voice was weak from crying. Sometimes, she went to the land and stood there quietly, listening. The air was heavy and still, and when the wind blew, it carried the smell of something deep and strange. Her children followed her, holding her wrapper, afraid to let it go. They missed their father, but they were too young to understand what had happened. Ngozi knew something was buried there, something that was not only her husband's body, but also his restless spirit. The villagers stopped passing near that land, until they saw a man shot moving in the land where there was no one there. Others said the soil sometimes looked wet even when it didn't rain. Ngozi felt her husband's presence all the time. She talked to him softly when she was alone. She would say, "Kalu, I will never let them take your land. I promise that." Even though she was weak from sorrow, her heart grew strong with love and fear. She believed that if anyone tried to touch that land, something terrible would happen. The land had become more than land. It was now Kalu's spirit watching over them. 3 months later, men from the city arrived in the village. They came with cars, peppers, and loud voices. They told the elders they wanted to buy the unused land to dig for oil. The elders were surprised because no one had ever cared about that land before. The men smiled and said it would bring wealth to everyone. They pointed straight to Kalu's land. Ngozi's heart jumped when she heard it. She knew at once what it meant. Her husband has been right. There was something valuable there. But she also knew the danger. She went to the meeting and said, "That land belongs to my husband." The men laughed at her and told her to go home. But her face was as hard as stone. The elders met again. The money the buyers offered was too much. They argued among themselves. Some said they should take it for the good of the village. Others said they should respect Ngozi's pain. The city men didn't wait. They came back with workers and tools, ready to start digging. Ngozi stood in front of the path and shouted, "You will all regret this." Her voice shook, but her eyes were fierce. The men pushed her aside and walked to the land. That night, the wind howled loudly over Omolo, and people said they heard a man crying from under the soil. The next morning, the workers came back with the equipment. Everything seemed fine until the head engineer slipped and fell. His leg broke badly, and he screamed in pain. The ground was dry, but it felt slippery, like something unseen had pushed him. The men carried him away, whispering that it was bad luck. The next day, A heavy machine that had stood firm before suddenly fell over itself and crushed a tent. The workers ran in fear. One of the workers said he heard the ground rumble before the incident happened. The air was thick with the smell of oil and death. They began to think the land was cursed. Even the strongest men started shaking when they came near the place. Their voices dropped, and they refused to sleep close to it. The manager shouted at them, saying, "Stop being childish." But the men wouldn't go back. Every night, strange noises come from the land. Low groans, heavy breathing, and whispers calling names that no one knew. Ngozi stood far away, holding her children, watching. Her heart hurt, but deep down, she felt her husband was still fighting for what was his. The manager, Mr. Eze, was an arrogant man. He didn't believe in spirit or curses. He said, "This is just nonsense." But one evening, he took a flashlight and walked into the land alone. The moon was full and the night was quiet. He stood in the middle and shouted, "If there is a spirit here, come and get me." His voice echoed in the distance. Then the air became heavy. His light flickered. Suddenly, a voice screamed beside his ear, "Stay away from my land." The sound was deep and full of pain. Mr. Eze dropped the light and fell to his knees, trembling and covering his ears. He felt something cold touching his neck, like a hand made of mud. He screamed and ran, falling many times until he reached the village. His clothes were dirty and his face was white with fear. He couldn't speak for hours, but when he finally did, he told the elders what happened. Everyone listened in silence. Even those who didn't believe in spirits before now looked at each other with wide eyes. Ngozi said softly, "You see what I told you? The land is not for us to take." From that day, no one joked on her words when she spoke. After Mercedes's experience, the company wanted to leave, but the elders stopped them. They said, "This is our only chance to bring money to the village." They called Ngozi and begged her to sell the land. They promised to build her a house and money for her children's future. But Ngozi shook her head and said, "You want money, but I want peace. My husband's blood is in that land. I will never sell it." Her words were calm, but her eyes showed fire. The elders argued over it for hours, but couldn't change her mind. They left angrily, saying she was a selfish woman. That night, the wind grew wide. Thunder rolled even though there is no rain. The elders couldn't sleep. They heard footsteps around their house and whispers that said, "Greed brings death." One elder woke up with bruises all over his arms, as if someone had held him tightly. Another found his room smelling like rotten soil. The fear grew until they stopped talking about the money and the land. They began to understand that Kalu's spirit was not at rest, and it was wanting them to leave what was his alone. The next few days, the villagers noticed strange things. One morning, they found deep handprints on one of the elders' door, made of dark oil mud. Those back all night, staring at nothing. The air around Kalu's land was always colder than the rest of the village. The people said the spirit was watching. Some started bringing small bars of food and water to the border, whispering prayer for peace. Ngozi watched quietly. She didn't speak much anymore. She just sat with her children and waited for the lamb to calm down. The elders gathered and said they were sorry that they made the mistake. They promised never to touch the land again. But it was too late. That night, one elder came in his sleep, shouting, "Please forgive us," before falling silent forever. The elders trembled and prayed until morning. They knew then that the land had chosen its keeper, and no living man could take his place. Ngozi felt a strange peace for the first time. She knew Kalu was still there, guiding what was his. After many workers refused to work, the oil company sent a young surveyor. He laughed at the village stories when he heard it. He said, "There are no spirits, only scared people in the village." He went to the land with his tools and camped there for 2 nights. He took notes, measured the ground, and draw lines on his map. Everything seemed fine on his first day, and he told the company that he would finish the map the next morning. But when he returned to his office, something strange happened. As he looked at his drawing, the lines began to twist and bend by themselves. The shape on the map turned into a man lying down. The surveyor shouted and tore the paper apart. He said the ink was turning black like thick oil mixed with blood. His friend tried to calm him, but he kept screaming that the land was alive. His hands shook and his eyes rolled like someone who had seen something terrible. They had to take him away to rest, but his mind never came back. The company men grew quiet. No one wanted to go near that land again. Everyone finally believed what the villagers had been saying all along. The land was angry, and Kalu's spirit was guiding it fiercely. One night, Ngozi couldn't sleep. She sat up and felt a strong pull towards the land. He knew she had to go, not to search but to talk. She tied her wrapper, took a small lamp, and walked there alone. When she reached the middle of the land, she knelt and touched the soil with both hands. Tears rolled down her face as she whispered, "Kalu, it's me, Ngozi. I know you are still there. We miss you so much. Please, rest now. I promise no one will ever take your land." Her voice broke as she spoke. That moment, the ground felt alive under her palms. Suddenly, the land trembled softly, just once, like it was breathing. The wind brushed her face gently, almost like a hand wiping her tears. Then came a deep silence that felt there is peace. Ngozi knew her husband had heard her. She cried gently, not from fear but from love. When she stood up, she felt lighter as if a great weight had lifted from her chest. She walked on slowly, knowing the land had finally accepted her words. From that night, he stopped dreaming of Carlos covered in mud. She dreamed of him smiling under a calm tree instead. A few days later, Mr. returned with the company's ladders. His face was pale and hands trembled slightly. He didn't come to buy anything. He stood before the elders and said, "We are leaving Umwalo. That land is not safe, and we can't walk there." The elders sat quietly. No one argued this time. The oil men packed their things and left, and soon, their loud cars disappeared down the dusty road. The village was silent again, but the silence was a peaceful one. The people whispered that Kalu's spirit had won. The elders met Ngozi's hut. They bowed their heads and said, "Please forgive us. We were blind." Ngozi said nothing for a long time. Then she nodded. She didn't smile or shout. She only said, "The land has spoken." After that, the villagers agreed never to talk about the land again. It became a sacred place. Today we are warned not to play near it. The land that once brought greed now taught the whole village the meaning of respect. As time passed, the land grew peaceful again. The grass became tall, and the flower bloomed near the edges. The villagers say it was because the spirit was wrestling. People began to leave some gifts there: yams, water, and palm wine at the border as a sign of respect. The elders told everyone that no matter how rich or poor a person is, they must never let greed blind their hearts. They say Kalu's spirits guide us all. Ngozi watched the land from her hut every day. Her heart was quiet for the first time in many months. She never allowed anyone to touch it. She told her children, "Your father is sleeping there. Don't ever let anyone wake him." The strange accidents stopped happening, and the whisper faded away. The land became calm, filled with the sound quiet strength Kalu once had when he was alive. At night, the moonlight made the sun shine softly, as if the land itself was breathing in peace. The villagers started calling it Alakalu, in Kalu's land. Ngozi lived the rest of her life in the same small hut. She never remarried. Her children grew up strong and kind like their father. Sometimes, she walked to the edge of Kalu's land with her children. She would stand there and tell them the full story of their father. how their father loved the land, how greed took his life, and how his spirit protected it. Her children listened with wide eyes while holding their hands tightly. She will point to the tall trees there and said, "This is where your father is resting." When Ngozi grew old, she asked to be buried beside her hut, facing the land. After her death, people said they sometimes saw two shadows walk at dusk, one tall, one small, moving together near the border. The land was quiet, its grass grew and thick, and no one ever dared to touch it again. Kalu had become one with the land, his internal keeper, guarding not just his land, but the heart of all who remember his story. Kalu's land was a living entity and a sacred covenant, not just a commodity to be bought and sold. Kalu's spirit, having died a violent and unjust death on his own inherited land, becomes inextricably tied to it. The land refuses to accept the injustice, acting as a final guardian for its rightful owner. The spirit's sole goal is not just for revenge, but to claim the land as a perpetual undisturbed resting place, thereby demanding justice for his mother. The land becomes an engine of terror only when the living, driven by greed for crude oil, try to defy Kalu's final resting place and profit for a tragedy. The spirit protects the integrity of the soil and punishes those who will disrupt the internal peace for the money. Now let me ask you, if you were Ngozi, knowing the land held your husband's spirit and immense wealth, would you have eventually sold the land to ensure their children had money for their future? Or would you have kept it sacred and unused forever? Let me know in the comment section. And this is the end of our story. But before we go, please don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel to join us for our future tales. Like this video now to show your support. And be sure to turn on the notification bell so you will never miss another story when it drops. Most importantly, if this story sent a shiver down your spine, please share it with your friends and family so they can gather by the fire with us next time. Until we meet again, bye.